The history of cinema is defined by the technology available to capture it. We moved from analog film stock to digital sensors, and now we see the frame migrate entirely from the physical world to the digital interface. This is the domain of Screenlife storytelling. It operates on a strict structural inversion. The audience does not watch a character use a laptop. The audience watches the laptop, and we reverse engineer the human psychology operating the cursor. Director and producer Timur Bekmambetov formalized this format into the Screenlife dogma. The manifesto relies on 4 rigid constraints: single-screen unity, unbroken real-time continuity, the device's camera dictates the framing, and purely diegetic sound. What started as an efficient way to shoot micro-budget horror quickly evolved. Over 2 decades, the format matured, proving it could sustain emotionally resonant prestige procedurals and complex character dramas. Screenlife functions as a mirror, reflecting a modern society defined by mediated relationships, algorithmic judgment, and lives lived entirely through a glowing rectangle. Which brings us to the 2026 film Mercy, a $60 million studio action thriller starring Chris Pratt, attempting to execute a ticking clock narrative within the confines of a desktop UI. The production scale immediately fractures the format's rules. Mercy repeatedly abandons its claustrophobic device framing for sprawling, non-device cinematography. The film is trapped in a formal contradiction. It tries to leverage the intense, locked-in intimacy of a strict interface procedural while actively fulfilling the visual demands of a massive studio tentpole. You get a violent clash of visual languages. A diegetic ring camera feed is followed by the impossible, disembodied angles of a traditional Hollywood camera setup. Scaling a Screenlife film to blockbuster proportions is not an evolution. By injecting traditional cinematic spectacle, the film actively dismantles the precise psychological mechanics that make the format effective. In a standard shot reverse shot, the viewer's perspective clicks securely into the fiction. Screenlife instead relies on a Meta-Suture. The digital interface replaces the camera, establishing a direct psychological tether. But when Mercy cuts to sweeping drone photography, that impossible camera angle instantly shatters this tether. The spectator is left in a state of formal instability. You are constantly whipsawed between being a grounded device operator and a floating, passive cinema voyeur. Instead of expanding the digital reality, the massive budget alienates the audience. It destroys the immersive trust the Screenlife format requires to function. Jamie Barron's archive effect describes a core psychological principle. When viewers observe footage that looks gritty, accidental, and unauthored, they inherently trust it as an authentic historical record. Early Screenlife films weaponized this effect. By limiting themselves to low-resolution webcams and authentic digital debris, the rough edges validated the reality of the narrative. The opposing concept is hypermediacy. This occurs when the proliferation of software interfaces and windows becomes a highly designed artificial spectacle in itself. Mercy operates at the extreme end of hypermediacy. Its municipal cloud archives and doorbell camera feeds appear perfectly color-graded and meticulously VFX supervised. Navigating Mercy's glossy, multi-pane dashboards feels entirely sterile when compared to the visceral tension of discovering raw, unpolished digital evidence. The massive VFX budget neutralizes the archive effect. By styling surveillance footage to look like polished product design, the film scrubs away the historical residue necessary for a gripping procedural. Christian Metz's classical Apparatus Theory positions the cinema spectator as a hidden observer. You sit in a dark theater, looking without being seen. This diagram shows the classical dynamic. You observe through a one-way mirror with zero consequences. But Screenlife dismantles this safety wall. Characters look directly into the lens, establishing a reciprocal gaze. Now, the lens returning your gaze belongs to an AI judge. This setup collapses the distinction between observation and evaluation. The audience is locked into an algorithmic stare, forced to perform innocence for a machine. By trapping us in this reciprocal gaze, the film's structure implicates the viewer in the exact surveillance complicity its plot is attempting to critique. Michel Foucault analyzed the Panopticon as a disciplinary architecture. An invisible, centralized observation point forces subjects to constantly regulate their behavior, simply because they might be watched. The film maps this directly onto its setting. The protagonist is strapped into the mercy chair, immobilized and completely visible to an unseen authority. The premise extends this panopticon from a single prison cell to the entire municipal layout of Los Angeles, connecting every camera to a central grid. Scholar Shoshana Zuboff defines this as surveillance capitalism, the economic system that unilaterally extracts human behavioral data to be packaged and sold for profit. Here we find the fatal paradox of the production. Amazon MGM Studios financed a film where the hero's exoneration relies entirely on the flawless operation of Amazon's own Ring camera infrastructure. This corporate reality sabotages the text. Instead of dismantling algorithmic justice, it acts as a massive advertisement for the very surveillance it critiques. The purest, low-budget Screenlife films end with bleak, uncompromising verdicts on digital exploitation. Hybrid blockbusters, conversely, end with safe, reassuring resolutions. Extreme financial constraints actually freed early directors. Without massive studio capital on the line, they delivered devastating critiques of technology free from corporate interference. Massive investments require narrative safety. A blockbuster cannot effectively indict the surveillance state when it is mandated to flatter the technological platforms its parent company profits from. The thematic edge is instantly diluted as the intimate, chaotic desktop is expanded into a sanitized, commercial void. The genre's history suggests a recurring tension. As budgets swell to meet studio expectations, the capacity for uncompromising technological critique often diminishes. Mercy is a failed stress test. It proves that the distinct aesthetic power of Screenlife relies entirely on the strict, lo-fi constraints it tried to abandon. The genre's fascination with algorithmic observers is a rehearsal for cinema's impending reality, deep entanglement with generative and evaluative AI. We moved rapidly from watching primitive webcam ghosts to being judged by highly advanced corporate-owned algorithms. Modern Screenlife cinema documents the rapidly eroding distance between the act of watching a film and being watched by the machine.